Hello, go ahead and label this lesson solving multi-step equations and set up your Falcon notes. We are going to start with our essential question, which is how can we use number properties to solve linear equations and justify a solution method? So we're going to review our number properties first. Our commutative property tells us that with addition and multiplication, order does not matter. A plus B is going to be the same thing as B plus A, and A times B is also the same thing as B times A. Our associative property tells us that with addition and multiplication, again, grouping does not matter. A plus, and then in parentheses, B plus C would be the same thing as A plus B in parentheses and C. And the same thing applies with multiplication. Grouping does not matter. And then our last one is distributive property. If we have a number on the outside of a parenthesis, that number is being multiplied into the first term and second term of that parenthesis, and we either add or subtract those numbers. So when we're solving, there are steps that we can follow to help us get x alone. The first thing that you should look at is to try and get rid of any parentheses. Then if you have multiple x, you're going to want to move all the x's to the same side and combine like terms. Then we want to add and subtract numbers away from x, multiply and divide numbers away from x, and then we're going to check our work. So one thing that I do want you guys to know is when we do multi-step equations, there's obviously going to be a bunch of different examples of multi-step equations, and they're not all going to look exactly the same. So I'm going to show you a few of the harder examples that I've seen, and then we're going to just try some practice problems during class together. So our first example is 3 parentheses x plus 1 equals 5 plus x. So I'm going to split my equation up right down the middle for a left side and a right side. So the first thing that I notice is that I do have a set of parentheses here and a number directly out in front which tells me that I need to multiply. So I'm going to take this 3 and I'm going to multiply that 3 to the x, which gives me 3x. Then I'm going to take that 3 and also multiply it to the 1. 3 times 1 is positive 3. So this turns into 3x plus 3. I'm going to bring down my equal sign, and I haven't touched this 5 plus x yet, so that can just be dropped down as well. Now, this equation is a little different than equations we've seen before because I have two x's. I have an x on my right side and I have an x on my left side. If you have more than one x, you want to move all the x's to the same side. So it doesn't matter which x that I'm going to move here, but I'm going to move the smaller one. So I have 3x and I have 1x. So I'm going to move the 1x. And since this 1x is being added, I'm going to move it by subtracting. So I'm going to subtract x on both sides. I can only combine this x with my 3x. And that's because this 3 does not have an x attached to it. Remember, in order to combine them, they have to have the same variable. So 3x minus 1x, 3 minus 1 gives me 2x. I haven't touched this plus 3 yet, so that just gets dropped down to the next line. And then I drop down my 5 on the other side as well. And then x minus x, those cancel out. Now what you'll notice is we have just one x left, so we want to move all the numbers attached to that x away, which would be this plus 3 and this multiply by 2. So when we move numbers away from the x, we first start with addition and subtraction. So to get rid of this plus 3, I'm going to subtract 3 on both sides. My 3's cancel, I drop down my 2x, and I am left with 2x equals 5 minus 3, which is 2. And then to get rid of this 2 out in front, I know that it's being multiplied to that x because there's nothing in between. I have to divide both sides by 2. My 2's cancel out, I'm left with x equals, and then 2 divided by 2 is just 1. So there's our solution for number 1. Let's move on to number 2. I have 2 parentheses x plus 2 and then minus 5 equals 3 parentheses x plus 1. So I have 2 sets of parentheses that I need to get rid of at first, and I'm going to split up my equation into 2 sides. So in order to get rid of these parentheses, I have to use my distributive property. So I'm going to start with my 2 and I'm going to multiply it to the x. 2 times x gives me 2x. Then I'm going to go back and take 2 times 2, which gives me 4. I haven't touched this minus 5 yet, so that just gets brought down to the next line. and then I bring down my equal sign. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the right-hand side of my equation. I'm going to take this 3 and distribute it to the x. 3 times x is 3x. Then I'm going to take that 3 and distribute it to the 1. 3 times 1 is 3. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to simplify anything on the left-hand side and the right-hand side that I can, which means combining like terms. So if I look at my left-hand side, my 2x doesn't have anything to combine with because there's nothing else on this side with an x in it. But I can combine my 4 and my minus 5. Those are like terms. They're both just plain old numbers, so we can combine them. 4 minus 5, those will combine to give me minus 1. And then I just bring down my 2x because I haven't used that yet. 3x plus 3, those two things cannot combine because one has an x and one does not, so we just drop those down to the next line. So now what I'm left with is 2x minus 1 equals 3x plus 3. I can see that I have two x's here. I have a 2x and I have a 3x. So I want to move both of those x's to the same side. I'm going to move the smaller one, which would be 2x. This 2x is positive since there's nothing in front of it, so I'm going to subtract the 2x from both sides. Minus 2x. These two x's cancel. I bring down my minus 1 since I haven't used it. Equals 3x minus 2x. 3 minus 2 is 1x. And then I bring down my plus 3. So now I have minus 1 equals 1x plus 3. I need to get rid of this plus 3. I don't necessarily need to get rid of the 1 because the 1 out in front doesn't really affect our x at all. So I just need to get rid of that plus 3, and I can do that by subtracting 3 from both sides. So what I'm left with is 1x, or just x, equals, and then negative 1 minus 3, they have the same sign, so we add the numbers and take the sign. We take the negative, and then 1 plus 3 is 4. So I end up with an answer of x equals negative 4. All right, and let's move on to our last example here. Remember, these examples are just a few of the many that you could possibly see. So we're just kind of focusing on working through some different variations of linear equations that you might see. So in this problem, I notice right away that I have two sets of parentheses. So as usual, I kind of want to get rid of those parentheses first. So I'm going to use distribution. So I'm going to take that negative 3, remember take the sign with that out in front, and multiply it into my first parenthesis. So negative 3 times 4x leaves me with negative 12x. And then I take that negative 3 and I multiply it to positive 3. A negative 3 times positive 3 leaves me with a negative 9. So I have 12x minus 9. I'm going to bring down this plus sign since I haven't used it yet. And then I'm going to take this 4 and distribute it into my parentheses over here. So I have 4 times 6x, which gives me 24x. And then 4 times positive 1, which gives me positive 4. I bring down my equal sign, and I bring down my 43. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look on the left-hand side of my equation and the right-hand side of my equation just to see if there's anything that I can combine. Remember, we want to combine like terms. And I can see already that I have two x's, which is typically an issue for us because we usually want just one x. But since they're on the same side of the equal sign, I can just combine those things. So I'm going to write all like terms next to each other, starting with my x's. So I have negative 12x, and I have plus 24x. Those are like terms. And then our other set of like terms are negative 9 and positive 4. So I'm going to write those two right next to each other, negative 9 and positive 4. And then I'm going to bring down my equals 43 on the other side because this one's all by itself. It has nothing to combine with on the right-hand side. So now that I've written all my like terms together, I can go ahead and combine them. Negative 12x plus 24, those are opposite signs, so we subtract. And we are left with positive 12x. And then negative 9 plus 4, again, opposite signs, so we subtract. We're left with negative 5. Okay, and then I bring down my equals 43. Now what we're left with is 1x, and I can move all the numbers away from that 1x. I have to move this minus 5 and the times 12. So I start with the minus 5. In order to move that, I have to add 5 on both sides. So my 5's cancel out, and I bring down my 12x equals, and then 43 plus 5 is 48. And then my last step that I want to do is get rid of that 12. That 12 is being multiplied to the x, and I know that it's being multiplied to the x because there's nothing in between, no signs in between, so I divide both sides by 12. My 12's cancel, and I'm left with x equals, and 48 divided by 12 is 4. So my final answer is x equals 4. So our summary for today is going to be there are many variations of linear equations, but the goal is always to get x by itself. All right, I will see you guys in class. Bye.